What is up, guys? Tate here, back with my first movie review on my creative YouTube channel. Hey, it's Tate. Haven't really used it in a while, I don't think. The last big video I uploaded was a while ago, but anyways, I just want to start trying to do movie reviews on YouTube instead of Snapchat or Instagram, because sometimes you want to talk about a movie and you want to say more than about a minute's worth about it. So this will be a non-spoiler at first and then a spoiler review later on, and I'll let you guys know when it gets into spoilers, but I'm just kind of improvising this and seeing kind of where it goes. So Spider-Man as a superhero has meant a lot to me over the years. I've always been a fan of Spider-Man, and he's always been probably my favorite superhero. But things started getting a little bit deeper, I guess, when the Spider-Man game came out for the PS4 back in 2018. And then you had Into the Spider-Verse, and then you had Far From Home come out, and I loved everything there. And so from there, leading up to this new film, No Way Home, I started going back and watching all the Spider-Man films that I had either seen decades ago or had not seen ever. So I went back before this film came out and I watched the Raimi trilogy, and I watched the two Mark Webb Garfield films, and I also watched the MCU films, two ones there. And I cannot stress enough how essential, and this isn't a spoiler because it's based off of, if you've seen the trailer, the villains from those films appear back in this film. It is essential to watch the Raimi films and the Mark Webb films, and also the MCU 2 films. Those are essential viewing for this film, and your enjoyment will not be as heavy if you don't know anything about those. So please go watch those. They are, for the most part, amazing films. I'm not the biggest fan of The Amazing Spider-Man 2 or 1, to be honest, but they're okay and they're decent, and you need to watch them. So no spoilers here, but I want to talk about just how much I love the film and how everything is just from every standpoint. So I think the writing, for the most part, is pretty phenomenal. There are some things in there I don't really like. For example, in the trailer, Doctor Strange says, "Scooby-Doo this crap."
Scooby-Doo this crap.
And I think that's kind of a really terrible line. It's not funny, even though my entire theater laughed at it. And it just felt really weird to hear him say that, and it feels weird in the film as well. So I'm not a big fan of that. But for the most part, a lot of the really typical sort of like MCU humor works really well, and I was shocked at how well a lot of the comedic moments were placed in what is essentially a really dark take on Spider-Man in a really sort of depressing film for a lot of the runtime. But I'm really happy that all the comedic moments that were there, and they're mostly in the first half. The second half is not nearly as humor filled, and I appreciate that, because what happens, the comedy that is there lands really well. And I also think that they wrote a great arc for Tom Holland in this film. It's his best arc out of Homecoming. Far From Home and No Way Home. No Way Home has the best written Tom Holland, 100%, no doubt about that, and he gives his best performance here. On top of the performances, if we're gonna talk about that, oh my god, William Dafoe as Green Goblin is absolutely incredible, and I was blown away by his performance. Jamie Foxx is also really good as Electro, and then Doc Ock, Alfred, I think Molina is how you say his last name, is also incredible. Everyone in this film is on their A game. Aunt May's actress is great too, especially in a certain scene. She is the best she's ever been, honestly. And that's saying a lot for MCU Aunt May, because MCU Aunt May, in my opinion, felt pretty underdeveloped in the past 2 films, and that was one of the issues I had. Another one of the issues I had is the Iron Man stuff. So I like the fact that Iron Man and Peter Parker have this sort of relationship in the MCU, and I like seeing how Iron Man's death affected Peter Parker going into Far From Home, but the use of Stark technology in the suits never really felt right, and he does use some of that here, but it doesn't bother me as much because it feels a lot more new, and it feels a lot more important and relevant for for a reason I will get to later on in the spoiler review if I remember it. It is really great. So in this film, I just feel like the Stark technology isn't as much of a focus, and I appreciated that. And there's a specific scene at the end that I'll talk about that really ties into that in the spoiler section, but there's a lot I can't talk about here in the no spoiler section. I want to say also, the trailers did a pretty good job at telling you what this first half is going to be like, but the second half is completely, it blew my mind. I did not expect pretty much anything that happened in the second half. There are a lot of great moments in the second half of this film, and in the first one too. What I actually appreciated about the first half is a lot of it kind of felt like this high school romantic comedy thing, which is the exact same thing that they did in Far From Home. I feel kind of outspoken on this, but I love Far From Home, and part of why I love Far From Home so much is the first half of the movie being this this high school like field trip film. I think that's so adorable, and I love seeing that, and I think it's done well, because it's not just the romance that we're looking at between MJ and Peter Parker, but it's also looking at the friends and how they react and how his classmates are doing and all the teachers, and I love seeing that because it has a lot of nostalgia for me for like my own field trips, but also those character interactions are just so wholesome, and seeing a little splice of that with Peter and friends becoming like, they're going into their senior year in college acceptance and stuff, it was really cool to see them going through that, and I think a lot of people are going to relate to those experiences, and they're going to have a lot of fun with it. I had a lot of fun with the first half of this film, and I think it's getting hated on a bit more than I would hate on it. I think it's great. Obviously, the second half is much better. Well, not even much better. It's better, but I still think the first half is really solid, even if the writing isn't as strong in the first half. With how Peter gets mixed up into this whole multiverse situation, it's not as strong, but I think it's done and executed fantastically. And again, I love the high school stuff. I can't lie to you, I do. So now we're going to get into the spoilers part of the film. If you don't want to see it, please go watch the film as soon as you can, as soon as you've seen the other films, and you're free to come back to this section of the video. But talking about spoilers, Matt Murdock as Daredevil, I actually think that's his canon name, is here in this film. Within the first 10 minutes we see him, and the audience went crazy. Not gonna lie, I haven't seen Daredevil, unfortunately, so I didn't quite know who he was at first, but I know how hyped that is for a lot of people, and it made me want to watch Daredevil all the more than I already did, so I definitely need to get on that. But it was such a fantastic appearance, just the way that the camera pans from, I think, his little cane right here up to his face. It was unexpected, but I really enjoyed it. Also, the whole thing, the friend, I forget his name, but Bobby or whatever, trying to act like Spider-Man's friend. He's got a whole book published. I think that fits his character so well, and it's a small thing, but I really enjoyed it, because again, I really enjoyed that part in Far From Home with him, so that was really nice to see. The whole MIT thing and them getting in MIT, that worried me a little bit at first, because I feel like there's this trend within a lot of Hollywood movies, is that they give their protagonist this really bold college decision situation where they're gonna either end up at Berkeley or they're gonna end up at MIT or some really big name school, and I kind of was like, I wish they would do more realistic in the vein that these characters are probably going to just go to where most people go, right? But Spider-Man is special, and so is MJ, and so is Ned, so it makes sense here for them to be given MIT. Unlike the Kissing Booth, where in the Kissing Booth they were deciding between, I think it was Berkeley and like Harvard. That was completely ridiculous. Here, the academic thing, I think it makes sense. And I was really surprised when it turns out they all get denied. I mean, obviously not because of their intelligence, but because of the whole situation. But that was a really cool moment, I think, because in most films, you know, they're gonna get accepted, and it's like, oh wow, like these are really special people. Okay, Spider-Man's little iron suit, for the most part, is kind of fell a little pointless. Well, he uses it against Doc Ock, and actually the whole like Stark technology thing, they're both kind of, I guess, similar. It's not explained in the best way, but essentially, he can now control Doc Ock's arms because of the technology that Stark gave him. So I'm happy it ended up coming really in handy later on. Jumping forward probably to Aunt May's death. Wow. They pulled out some really big emotions for that one. I think I've never seen Tom Holland act this amazing ever, and he's a great actor, don't get me wrong, but I would put Andrew Garfield probably above him as far as performing Spider-Man, and he right up there matched and maybe even surpassed him at certain points with his performance when it came to Aunt May's death. And again, Aunt May is fantastic in the scene leading up to her death and in that scene where she dies, because when she takes out the Green Goblin, she injects the little serum or whatever, I think is what she tried to do. I mean, absolutely, that was great. That was kind of like the character arc and just the activity that we really needed from Aunt May, because we hadn't gotten that before in the MCU. So I was very happy with that. And again, Tom Holland's performance and William Dafoe's performance. This is the first part in the movie where his acting chops, I feel like, really, really shine. You can hear it in his voice, and you can see it on his facial expressions. Just, he is so hungry for blood, Peter Parker's blood, and he is going all in on this performance, and it is fantastic. I love William Dafoe, always have, always will, and he delivers. Not too long after that, I mean, that scene, that whole sequence is given plenty of weight, plenty of gravity, and I'm really happy they did that and weren't immediately like, oh, insert comedy here, because I feel like that is something they would have done in other MCU films, but they didn't here, and I appreciate that so much, because soon after that, not right after that, but soon after that, we get Ned gets the little ring thing from Doctor Strange, and he gets the magical powers. I don't know if it enables magic powers or if he's always had that, but either way, he opens up the first portal, and out comes Andrew Garfield. And quite an entrance that was. I actually was not expecting the entrance to be like that, because in my mind going into this film, it made kind of more sense for like Toby and Andrew to show up in like a big battle and they help him in the battle and that's it. But I'm actually really shocked, and I'm really happy that they were more than just like cameo appearances in this movie. They are like a central, very important part of this film. And that's one of my favorite things about it, is how much they use those characters and they bring those characters back and they fulfill previous arcs that either had already been fulfilled or had not been fulfilled. They just fulfill them to the max, if that makes any sense. I mean, I think it's amazing. So Andrew Garfield comes in, and I have the scene memorized in my head now because I've seen all the audience reactions, every single way they do the shots. I've got it all like memorized now. And he comes in, and I think MJ's like, well, prove you're Spider-Man. And he does the things where he gets up on the ceiling here. The ceiling is very tall in my room, so you can't quite see it. But gets up on there and just proves that he is Spider-Man. And then that opens another portal, and out comes Tobey Maguire. Looking, my man is looking fantastic. Tobey is probably my favorite Spider-Man besides Tom Holland, and I love Andrew Garfield too. The only thing with Andrew Garfield is that his films weren't written nearly as well as I feel like the Raimi films were, or even the Home trilogy. The rumors are true right? The leaks are true. That actually, there's a video that was leaked that I saw, and it was Andrew Garfield on a set. It's like a blue screen, and he's hanging on like a rail here, and he's talking to someone. And there's a bunch of videos, I think, circulating on the internet that were like, is this real? Is this fake? Like, it could have been a deep fake, but no, it's completely real, because there's a scene in this movie where he's in that exact same pose doing the exact same thing, and it was just like, oh shoot. that was real. That was for this film. And then before the final battle, I'm happy they don't get right into the final battle. I'm happy there's like a few moments there where they really talk to each other and they have strategy. When you have Andrew Garfield and Tobey Maguire coming up to Tom Holland, who's just sitting on a rooftop thinking about Aunt May's death, and they have Andrew saying, I know what that feels like, obviously referencing the death of Gwen Stacy, which was a fantastic part of The Amazing Spider-Man 2, in my opinion. That's the best part of the movie. But then you have Tobey Maguire saying, I also know how that feels. And he is, of course, talking about Uncle Ben and how he let that happen. A lot of feels there. I think they executed that the best they could. They really had those characters shine in their own respective ways. And also seeing them work together with all the banter they threw around was great. I also got to talk about the villains banter was also fantastic. Just having these people from these different universes in this weird situation collide and talk about their situation. They did it so much, and that is so much fan service. It's like a really well-written fan fiction that makes sense, and that is canon, and that is wonderful. That is how I would put the second half of this film. And then we kind of get into the final battle, obviously. And the one really big moment that happens here that has been on my mind, in my brain for the last few hours, is MJ falls, right? Tom Holland goes after her. Of course he does, right? This is MJ. And then Green Goblin comes in, pushes him aside, and none other than Andrew Garfield swings in to save her. And that is such a redeeming, satisfying moment, especially compared to The Amazing Spider-Man 2, where Gwen Stacy died. Saving MJ, that is one of the best things they could have done. There's a lot of other things that happen here. I think there's a scene where Electro and Andrew Garfield talk quite a bit, and there's also one, I really like this one with Sandman and Tobey Maguire, and they're talking, and he's like, Sandman, you can go now, you can go back home, because that's all Sandman really wanted to do. But then, even better, is a Doc Ock scene where they're talking, and Doc Ock is like proud of Peter, seeing him all grown up, and it makes you realize that these people weren't villains originally. They are just trying to be good people, or they're trying to do good for either the world or themselves. And it's such a vulnerable, like, villain and hero heart-to-heart moment, and it is done superbly. Later on, the Green Goblin becomes like the only real foe sort of left, and there's a callback to Spider-Man 1 where Tom Holland has this piece of, I think, his armor or his set or whatever, and is about to impale him with it, essentially. He is really angry, and I love how angry Tom Holland is in this scene. He is beating him up to a pulp, right? And then he comes in with this thing, and he's about to do it. And Tobey Maguire notices, and he comes down, and he's like, stop. And he, like, fights with him almost, like he's looking at him. And my favorite part about this is there's like no dialogue. There's like no dialogue at all. It's just straight. You can feel what they're saying just by looking at them. It's very show, don't tell in that sort of sense, where they are just looking at each other and you can tell just what they're wanting to say or what they're saying just with their actions. And I thought that was one of my favorite scenes in the movie, because there was no dialogue and there was no dialogue needed, and they did it, and it was fantastic. Kind of going on what happens later. So Doctor Strange obviously casts that spell where everybody forgets who Peter Parker is, and there's a lot of heartfelt moments that come after this. the scene where he goes to Aunt May's grave and Happy's there, and Happy doesn't know him, but they still are able to bond because they share that they knew Aunt May. Even if they don't know each other, they still kind of have this connection, and it's really bittersweet. But what's even more bittersweet is at the end when he goes into the coffee shop that MJ is working at and tries to tell her everything, but then Ned comes in, and Ned is sitting down and they're talking because, you know, they're still friends, they still know each other, they're going to MIT together, right? Because they got in through the Spider-Man stuff never really happening, them not getting wrapped up in it. But anyways, so Peter Parker's just there and he's a stranger, and he wants to tell MJ and Ned that they have all this history together, but he's got this piece of paper, and eventually he realizes he just can't do it. Or maybe he shouldn't do it, and then he walks out. After that, Peter kind of comes into his apartment. It's so barren, and that is so depressing, but he eventually ends up making his own suit, which totally goes against the whole Tony Spider-Man tech suit stuff that we've been having, that people have been complaining about. And I love how he's making his own suit, but he jumps out onto the winter streets, snow in New York, Christmas tree, and he takes one final swing, and then the film ends. Now, talking about the mid-credits and the post-credits scenes real quick, I haven't seen Venom 1 or 2, but I know what happens. I've had the post-credits scene spoiled for me. I mean, I kind of looked it up myself, but the symbiote kind of coming out and then the little drop being there, Venom's going to come into the MCU, it looks like. Venom comes in, and then there's also the Doctor Strange trailer. It's a full-on trailer as a post-credit scene, which is an interesting decision. I would have probably preferred a actual post-credit scene rather than a trailer, but it was a cool trailer, so they are forgiven for that. I love seeing Wanda back in action. WandaVision is probably my favorite MCU show so far, and Doctor Strange 2 looks good. Sam Raimi's directing, so it'll probably be even better than I'm expecting, and my hype should probably be a little bit higher than it is, but I'm excited for that. I'm excited for Thor: Love and Thunder. I hope Tom Holland does more of the Marvel films because he is my favorite Spider-Man, and I want to see him continue at least for a few more films. I don't even necessarily need a trilogy out of him, even though I feel like that's what we're gonna get. I think I would be fine with just maybe one more film, if anything, or him showing up in another film and having an exit, like a really profound exit, maybe in Doctor Strange. But I think they'll keep milking the cash cow. They'll try and get him on for another trilogy, which I'm completely fine with because I love him. I think we're really lucky that we're finally getting a Spider-Man that feels really in place, as against, Raimi with Spider-Man 4 and the creative differences there, and then the creative differences with Webb. Everything seems to be going fine with John Watts and the writers for the Home trilogy, so hoping that continues for the next trilogy if there is one. And as far as overall on this movie, I'm feeling a solid 9.5 out of 10. There are a few issues, specifically with the first half with the writing, that kind of takes me out of it and makes me want to say, okay, this isn't perfect, because it's not perfect. But in so many respects, in so many ways, it is everything I've ever wanted from a Spider-Man movie, from a superhero movie, from an event crowd pleaser, bringing people back to theaters film. It's everything I wanted and more. And for that, I don't even know what to say to that, because I've wanted that so much since Endgame. I've wanted another film like this, where people go out in droves to crowds to go see a film. And that's what this was. And it turned out to be a really great film, even without that. So 9.5 out of 10. I guess this is the section of the video where I say like and comment, subscribe if you liked it, and I will definitely try and do more film reviews on this channel in the future. So yeah, see you.